And France 24's Georja Calvin-Smith is in Berlin at the World Forum on the Future of Democracy, AI Tech and Humankind, where she's going to speak to former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Palestinian Foreign Minister Nasser al-Qudwa. Good morning, Georja.
Morning, Oliver. It's a tough time to speak to the guests that I have today because they've really done what they can in creating a platform to represent collaboration. And, I really appreciate, gentlemen, the time that you've made in the middle of all of this to come and discuss these latest developments, which, must be so disappointing. First of all, former Palestinian Foreign Minister Nasser al-Qudwa, Ehud Olmert, former Israeli Prime Minister. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Where does this leave the peace process?
In shambles, of course, because it was very unfortunate that this Israeli government, the government of Mr. Netanyahu, decided to wage a coup against the agreement that exists between the two sides and resume the war against the people in Gaza. And frankly, I don't understand what is needed more than the destruction that has already taken place. So it's really very unfortunate, and it's definitely a step backward. It will cause all kinds of problems, but we'll manage. I mean, the people will manage, and they prove to be resilient and to be able to overcome any problems and any difficulties.
And what do you think is the thinking behind this? Yes, Israel said that it was because of Hamas not agreeing to terms, but it does seem to be a huge gamble with the lives of those still stuck in the Palestinians still stuck in the midst of these airstrikes. What do you think is Israel's thinking behind the long-term gains that can come out of this?
There is no thinking about long-term to start with. We have to be accurate. There was no peace, and there were no negotiations for peace. There were negotiations for an exchange, for ceasefire in exchange of returning the hostages. And Prime Minister Netanyahu blew it because he doesn't want the return of the hostages. What he wants is to save his government, and the only way to save his government was to start this military operation that helped bring back his ally, the former Minister of National Security, Ben-Gvir. So regardless of what we all think about Hamas, which has to be destroyed to the maximum possible, but at this point we are not going to destroy Hamas. We are going to, unfortunately, perhaps, may lose the hostages, those who are still alive.
Is this a view that you think is reflected more widely in Israeli society, that this idea that the resumption of airstrikes may be informed as a political smokescreen rather than a bid to pursue any benefit for either the Israelis or the Palestinians?
I think it's obvious that the majority of the Israelis, the public opinion, you can see the streets, hundreds of thousands of people are demonstrating across country, in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, in the north, in the south, everywhere. The majority in the government, in the parliament today, is still in the hands of Netanyahu, and that can help him move this. But I think there is no doubt that the real motive for what has been done in the last couple of days is the desperate attempt to save the government.
And what do you think this means for those Palestinians who are still looking for someone to hold their hope? They've had weeks of respite in the midst of a particularly important holy time. To have this ripped away from them must be devastating. Where do you think the hopes of those Palestinians caught up in this are focused on at the moment?
It is devastating. There is no doubt about that. But as I told you earlier, I mean, the Palestinian people proved to be resilient, and they are accustomed to this kind of atrocities and this kind of destruction. So I'm sure that the Palestinian people will be able to overcome this and go for a solution. I mean, the solution is there. We presented a solution, Ehud, Olmert, and myself. We presented a solution a month ago, and that solution has to do with ending the war in Gaza and has to do with the overall political solution in the form of two states, Israel and Palestine, on the basis of 1967 borders with a swap of territory. Now, we understand that this might be difficult at this stage. We understand that tempers are high now and everybody is looking for revenge, for bloodshed and things like that. But there will be a time soon, hopefully, that people will pause and start thinking about the solution, that all this did not lead to any achievement, actually. So there is a need to change the course and go for a real solution, and we are going to do that, hopefully.
Practically, how does that work, though? We're in the middle of a demonstration of just how huge the chasm of trust, of willingness to work together is. How do you hold this hope that you have to build something tangible that might actually lead to a kind of negotiated way out of this? How do you hold that long enough to take it? Who are you taking it to? How do you build on this initiative that you're working on?
Yes, we are taking it to the most important quarters, that is to say the public on both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, and also governments in some important places like Germany, for instance, where we are now. And I'm sure that we'll do something positive. We'll move forward. Now, of course, it's not going to be easy. We understand that, but at the end of the day, people will start thinking where all this have taken us, what we have achieved. Nothing, actually nothing, except more death and more destruction, more suffering and more agony and more bloodshed. This cannot be the way forward, and we really need to stop and start thinking. Either we go for endless war and attempts to get rid of one side over the other, or we need to sit down as mature people and start talking on the solution. And as I said, we believe that the solution should be and can be only two states, Israel and Palestine, on 1967 borders.
But when it comes to the relationship that the international community has with Israel and has with the Palestinians, Israel spoke to Washington before deciding to resume airstrikes. So how do you, Prime Minister, feel that the new character of Washington might help, hinder, or generally inform the kind of conversations, collaborative conversations you are hoping to have going forward?
I love the term you used in order to describe what's going on in Washington now. I don't know to judge or to offer any observation about the long-range strategy of Trump's administration. I don't think that it has been articulated yet by them. So I don't blame them, I don't accuse them of anything, but I'm not certain that there is a long-range strategy as to how to deal with the more broader ramifications of what's going on now. The American administration, I think, was focused on one thing, which is definitely something that we Israelis wanted, which is the exchange of hostages. However, what has been done yesterday with the resumption of hostilities is the opposite of the real interest of our hostages. Most Israelis believe that it will probably cause the demise of the hostages rather than save them and exchange them. So we have to come back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals is what Dr. al-Qudwa and myself offered. There has to be a long-range strategy, a vision of how we can move out from where we are now. Israel wants, and for good reasons, to destroy entirely the Hamas. Well, let's say that we have done this, that there is not one single Hamas, which is, of course, will never happen, but let's just assume for the sake of discussion that one Hamas will not remain alive, okay? There are still 2.5 million Palestinians living in Gaza and 3.5 million Palestinians living in the West Bank. What are we going to do with them? What is the vision what is the horizon, the political horizon, how to deal with it on a long range, that we will stop the occupation and the Palestinians will exercise their right for self-determination, and Palestine will live alongside the state of Israel in peace and security, in full sovereignty. This is the strategy. Now, how do we achieve that? You know, Dr. al-Qudwa is a distinguished and Palestinian that has done a lot for his people for many years, but he is retired. And I'm a former prime minister, not present. But together we can help raise the awareness of the international public opinion of governments. We were talking with the French government many times. President Macron knows exactly what we propose, and I believe that he shares with us our attitude, and so are leaders and prime ministers and foreign ministers of most European countries that we already met. And what we will do, and no one will stop us, is to force on the international awareness and the international community, in governments in Europe, in the Arab countries, in America, in Southeast Asia, everywhere, the need to move forward for a comprehensive solution. There is only one two-state solution, and it will return back into center stage, and it will be done.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time.
We'll do it.
Sorry?
We'll do it.
We hope you do. Thank you very much, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, former Palestinian Foreign Affairs Minister Nasser al-Qudwa. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georja Calvin-Smith there in Berlin.